Hi, my name's Amanda Dawson. I'm the head teacher at Mellors Primary School, which is in Radford in the city. So I've been head at Mellors for, I think it's 14 years now. I've since qualifying as a teacher, I've always worked in the city. That's all I've ever really wanted to do, because my personal vision, the purpose of my role in teaching, is to create opportunities for people that society might not necessarily want opportunities for, whether we like that or not. Well, I don't like it, clearly. And so I became the head at Mellors, and it was really very quickly, well, instantly, really important for me to make that the vision for the school. So we've worked really, really hard over the last 14 years to develop that vision, and our aim is to make sure that the community of Mellors, and you know, if you look at society and look at the you know, some of the media outlets, they might look at communities like ours and not necessarily want the best for them. There might be a glass ceiling put into place, and we feel that there are glass ceilings put into place for our community members. You know, there might be you know, families that are claiming benefits, black families, Muslim families, Pakistani families, Polish, Lithuanian, Libyan families from all over the world. But what we know is that it's really important for us at Mellors to make sure that we're part of what's a really cohesive, friendly, very high functioning community, and make sure that we're creating opportunities, really, really strong opportunities for children who are really bright, really aspirational parents. And actually it's not just for the, you know, not just for children. And great story, one of our former pupils was offered a place at Cambridge to read psychology, I think, but I'd need to check that out in September, which is hugely celebratory for us. But we've also got parents who've come to courses at Mellors, and we've started them off. You know, they've got into nursing, into medicine, into lots of different professions, because we started them off with sometimes basic English and maths. One of our parents is now a leading light at the University of Nottingham, being headhunted by the University of Oxford. He's one of our governors, and his work on stem cell research is some of the best in the world. So, you know, there are some real success stories, and that's what we believe in. We're all about creating opportunities for people who society might not necessarily want to create opportunities for. They like to, I think the societies sometimes like to maintain the status quo, and we don't. I think that the first time I really began to take COVID seriously, I knew about it, and at school we were beginning to think about it, and I think I'd played it down until I met up with a friend of mine who said, no, Amanda, this is going to be big. This is going to be really big. So this was probably mid-January, and I think I'd had it, which was interesting, but I didn't know it was it. But the first time I really took notice, we over the February half term, my daughter and I went to visit my sister who lives in Switzerland, and on the flight home there were people wearing masks, and we'd heard that Italy had gone into lockdown during that time. So when I came back, I realised that we were going to have to take it seriously. And then of course the wheels started turning at the local authority. There was lots of information out to schools, but I don't think anything could have prepared us for that last week. We were given a week to get everything together to put school into lockdown, and that was absolutely crazy. I mean, we did it because it's what we do. We do everything in a very level, very calm kind of way. It's really, you know, we can work quickly but well thought through. But and the local authority was absolutely 100% supportive. There's a great health and safety department with a guy called David Thompson who prepared us with a risk assessment and walked us all through it. So we were ready for lockdown, but it was the longest and shortest week of my life.
So I guess the natural question from that is, tell us about that week.
Yeah, the week of preparation. Yeah, well, we got the note. We learned. We were very quickly learning that information from the Department for Education and the government was going to come in really quickly. That we wouldn't always have a great deal of time to prepare for stuff, and that we had to be reactive. We learned to be reactive, positively reactive, and not flap, but just get things done. So that's really what that week was all about, making sure that we had all the paperwork in place, contacting parents, getting on top of who we were going to, which children needed to come to the childcare club, because of course we didn't close fully, there were a number of children that were invited, vulnerable children and children of key workers, that were invited to come into school should the parents need them to. So we had quite a job on that week, making sure that we'd targeted the right children, getting all the information from parents about who was a key worker, what constituted a key worker, and in the end, we at Mellors, because the government were pretty slow in coming up with their list of what a key worker was, we just agreed what we thought a Mellors key worker was, because we knew that for a lot of our parents it was working in a supermarket or working in care homes. So we got that list together, got it out to parents, and I think we did really well. But it was crazy. It was a crazy week with lots and lots of paperwork, lots of getting communications out to people, making sure that we're getting that right. Also, a crash course in online learning. So the teachers had never used any online platforms previously. We used a particular platform called Purple Mash that the children could do homework and things on and work in school on, but we'd never used it in the way that we had to train ourselves and the children to use it in lockdown. So there were lots of things going on, but because of the way that we work at Mellors, we've got different people that are, devolved out to be in charge of different things and to lead on different things. So that it went pretty smoothly, and we avoided major panics. I think the big thing that I had to really manage was making sure that people weren't flapping, but that anybody who was in a high risk group, we had 2 members of staff that were pregnant. So as soon as that night, one of the nights, I can't remember which one it was, we got the notification that it wasn't 100% sure that COVID wasn't dangerous to pregnant people. I just contacted the 2 and said, don't come in. I don't want to take chances with that kind of thing. So we were really careful to make sure that anybody who needed to be shielding, anybody who was asthmatic, they were all given the green light to stay at home and work from home.
I think the bit that I personally would like to understand is this idea that I'm guessing with the kind of community you've got at Mellors, that you kind of very quickly, not only were you supporting key workers inside a school, you were having to support people, I'm guessing, online,
yeah,
and you were having to give people one-to-one time in that respect, but also at Mellors, I'm guessing there was a massive part of supporting the community,
yeah,
in terms of them having enough food to
hugely.
eat, and the kids. So
that was huge.
Just that really. If you could talk about that, if that doesn't sound too
no, that's fine. And I think what evolved over the next few weeks was that we contacted every family every fortnight. So each teacher every fortnight contacted the parents of every child in their class, and that happened all the way through. They were setting work every day on the online learning platform and marking it every day. And keeping in touch with children that way. Some of the children didn't have internet access or a tablet or anything to access the work on, so we photocopied paper packs. So every 2 weeks, staff would go out and deliver paper packs and collect completed paper packs in. We had a rota so that all staff were in, apart from anybody who was shielding. Everybody was in. If they weren't working at home, they were in for the childcare club. So there was a huge amount of work. We were also keeping in regular contact with the parents. We had weekly phone calls and home visits to the parents of children who were vulnerable, so had a social worker, or actually that we were concerned about. So, we also, very much in the same way that we agreed the key worker group, the government told us which was the group of children that they considered vulnerable and we needed to keep in regular touch with. But actually, we had a group of families that 4 times that number that we knew we were concerned about. We knew we knew which parents wouldn't be coping with it, which parents may need to, hear a friendly voice on the end of the phone. So our safeguarding team made those phone calls every week. So phone calls and home visits to those families. But actually, what very quickly became apparent as those phone calls were happening was that a lot of our parents working in the service sector, often on 0 hours contracts, lost the jobs. So a lot of parents lost the jobs overnight, huge numbers, and were really struggling because of the gap in between. And I know the government really sped up the process of claiming universal credit, which was great. I've got to say, I think there were some things that they did right, and that was one of them. However, there was still a gap, and we have a food bank at Mellors. We've had it for probably 2 or 3 years now. As poverty increases, which it is doing, we're on the ground. We see it. We see how that's happening. But during the period of lockdown, It was replenished 4 times and it was emptied 4 times. Parents regularly coming, and no questions asked. We definitely didn't want to make anybody feel ashamed. But then we put appeals out on Facebook, and the generosity of people, not just in our community, lots of it was in our, but from far and wide. There was a guy got in touch with us who lived in Stoke Bardolph, and he was shielding. He was getting too much food. He didn't want it to go to waste. So I'd just nip there and pick up the 2 or 3 bags of spare food that he had and bring them in to school. But there was a huge spike in the number of parents that were needing to use our school food bank, because if you're working in a fast food place that's suddenly shut down, you've got no job security whatsoever, no sick pay. Those people were just lost their jobs overnight and were really struggling to feed families. And so it's our place, but that kind of school, we're a community school, that's what we do. So because we were in such regular contact. And what was really fascinating was that a lot of stuff we started putting out through Facebook. We've got a Mellors Facebook page, which became the most popular. Of course, we text all parents, but Facebook became the way of communicating. So we did a weekly Facebook live assembly every Monday afternoon. We'd go live on Facebook with an assembly that so lots and lots of parents and pupils were able to follow. Teachers would nominate somebody who'd been working really hard on Purple Marsh. We'd share the videos or the photographs of the work that they've been doing, just to kind of keep morale up. And actually the feedback from our parents has been overwhelmingly positive. They loved the phone calls. They were telling us that they had friends with children in other schools, and they'd heard nothing from teachers or from the school, which I think is a real shame. I'm sure that there weren't many schools that was happening. I know most schools in the city were doing exactly what we were doing. But it meant that we were able to kind of find out if there was anything that they needed help with, if there was anything going wrong, what was going really well.
The question, I think, would be what impact do you think it's had on the kids' learning and their morale and that kind of thing, really?
Do you know, in lots of respects, for me, the impact on learning is probably much less important than the impact on children's emotional health and their mental well-being, which is the thing that we'll be focusing on next year. We've already Zoom's transformed our lives in terms of meetings. Nobody's going to have to travel halfway across the city for an after-school meeting anymore. We can do it with Zoom. But we met with our school improvement advisor to do some school improvement planning, which sounds crazy, but it just felt right. And we've stripped it right back with sort of 3, we call them our 3, with 3 big rocks, focusing on reading, focusing on the curriculum, but focusing on on well-being for everybody, staff and pupils. It's going to be huge, I think, and that's the thing, that this is a once-in-a-century occurrence. This is history, big history in the making. I've been doing some research about the Spanish flu pandemic of 1918 to 19, and I think that we'll have a generation. It'll be one of those where we talk about, were you there? Living history kind of thing. But it's really important that we don't neglect the impact that this will have had on so many people and will continue to have into the future. It's changed the way that I see things. It's changed the way that I go into town, for instance. And I'm pretty robust and pretty up for anything, but I know that for our community, not just children, but children and families, it's something that we're going to have to look at really, really closely. And catch up, I don't know how I feel about all this kind of business of lost learning and catching up. We had the vast majority of our pupils really engaged brilliantly with the learning. We had some great project work. And some of the stuff that came out of that was really fascinating. Children learning in a different context, and the Key Worker Club was, children started to behave differently. When we got the children back, as soon as we could, we got them back, but a very different kind of school day. But what it meant was that children were more open. They loved the small classes. And we're really much more up for it. So I think there's a lot of learning for us when we come back. As I said, we're going to really focus on emotional health and well-being, but also some of that's about what we're teaching and the way we teach it. you know, banging on about English and maths, which we've avoided for the last few years. I have to say, you know, our curriculum has become much more broad and balanced. But I think shorter lessons, art took a really, you know, art became really important during the kind of latter end of lockdown, and something that we might have neglected in the past. So yeah, we're going to look at things really differently. It's given us an opportunity, a really good opportunity to look at what we do using online learning, you know, from teachers that wouldn't have known how to log into a Teams meeting, then sending invitations out for their own Teams meetings, that kind of thing, and Zoom. So we've learned a lot, and I think we really want to apply some of that into the future. Take the best of it, because it was scary, you know, it was a really scary time, and I felt hugely responsible for the safety and well-being of the whole school community. And that, you know, one of the things I always say about being the head is my name's above the door. If anything goes wrong, it's me. Quite rightly so, you know, that's what I'm paid to do, that's what the job's about. But I felt the responsibility of that during the COVID thing. And, you know, fortunately, touch wood, there were no cases that we know of at Mellors, and so that felt good. But I think that I certainly felt quite at times really weighed down by the responsibility of making sure that everybody was safe and happy. I guess the thing that makes me feel really emotional is the courage and the bravery of the Mellors team. And you know, we had very, very few people shielding or self-isolating, and when they needed to, they absolutely did, and there was never any pressure from me or anybody else for people to be in work. But the commitment of the team made me feel emotional. I felt really moved 2 or 3 times to tears by their absolute courage in coming in and wanting to do the right thing for the community. And some of them were battling their own deep anxieties. You know, in the face of all those deep-rooted anxieties, they came in, and they wanted to be in because they wanted to do the right thing. And I think probably for me, you know, I think there's potentially, there's a view out there with some people that teachers were sat on the backsides doing very little and having an extended holiday. Well, I can't speak for other. Well, I can speak for other schools actually, because we were in regular contact with other schools across the city. The Nottingham Schools Trust was coordinating what we did really, really, really efficiently. So I do know what other schools, and the vast majority of schools and staff teams were doing exactly what we were doing, which was working, whether that was setting work and marking work at home, you know, a full working day, or being in. And the longer it went on, the more children we had in, so the more staff needed to be in. And by the time, you know, by the end of July, everybody was in doing something. So that, I think for me, that was, you know, that was a really proud moment for me, that team of people who kind of smashed those glass ceilings of their own anxieties and things to do what was right for the community.